Shalom. Before I begin, I want to give all praises to Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahushua, by Hashem, Kodesh, the born city apostles and elders, green millstone. And shalom to the I am teaching his word throughout the four corners in true sincerity. I'm back with another lesson for the spirit and power of Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahushua, by Hashem, Kodesh. Lord willing to be edifying unto the elect. All right, the topic of this lesson, really going into how this is going to be our last, captivity. Our last, time, being, under the heathens. Okay. All right, very last time. These are things that we, have to rejoice at because, it's always been, captivity, through captivity, to captivity. But now, this is the last one. All right. I'm looking for Slovakia. I'm just gonna get Maccabees, but it's always been captivity to captivity, through captivity. But now, us being here in Babylon, all right, being in America, the fourth beast, the continuation of it, because all this is just a revised, Roman, system. These nations, indeed, they tell you, going into the Treaty of Rome, all right, setting up NATO and the EU. All right, it's just a continuation, of that system. All right, and when you read that, Daniel talks about the iron being mixed with the miry clay. All right, and how this is the last, it's basically like the fungus, and how these nations will be, ultimately, them being divided. All right, Esau, is divided. And the scripture tells us how a nation that's, a house divided against itself. It's like I'm all over the place, but, just to back up the point. In Mark 3:25 says, and if a house be divided against itself, the house cannot stand. All right, and it's Luke 11:17. But he, knowing their thoughts, and said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and a house divided against a house falleth. In America, this system, all right, they're all divided. Because how you have it, you have the NATO and the EU. All right. In America, they're supposed to be one alliance. Okay, but they're divided within themselves. All right. America does what they want to do. These nations complain, all right, and then they end up teaming with America's enemies. That's division. All right, but showing you that this is pertains to prophecy of this place being destroyed. All right, but back to what I was saying in First Maccabees 2 and First Maccabees 2:10. It says, "What nation?" I'm gonna start at 7. It says, "He said, woe's me, wherefore was I born to see this misery of my people and of the holy city, and to dwell there." So like it says, "When it was delivered unto the hand of the enemy, and the strings for her into the hand of strangers, her temple has become as a man without glory. Her glorious vessels are carried away into the captivity. Her infants are slain in the streets. Her young men with the sword of the enemy. What nation had not had a part in her kingdom and God of her spoils?" Right? All these nations had a piece, of Israel. Because ultimately it was, of our fault that it happened. Because how can the strongest nation, the smartest and strongest, nation on earth be conquered by these nations that are compared to as nothing, to the Lord? All right. We're supposed to be the sons of God. All right. We're supposed to be Yashar Allah, princes of the power. That happened because we were disobedient towards the Lord. All right. And because of that, he took, his wisdom and knowledge from us. Because what bringeth the kingdom? Wisdom. All right. So he took that from us, and he took, us being able to, deal with him from us. All right. That's why there was a time where we didn't know who we were. He took it away. He took it away. And because of that, he'd allowed nations to, come after us and, seize us and, ransack us, time after time. All right. It says, our ornaments are taken away. Of a free woman, she's become a bond slave. And behold, our sanctuary, even our beauty, our glory is laid waste, and the Gentiles have profaned it. All right. It says, to what end, therefore, shall we live any longer? All right. So it's not going to be, for much longer. Because, again, this is our last captivity. All right. Us be here under the rulership of Esau, Edom. That's the last captivity. All right. Because I was talking about the fourth beast in Daniel, the second chapter. Daniel 2. And I'm gonna start hearing how much I'm done. It's Daniel 2 and 31. It says, thou, O king, sawest and behold a great image. This great image whose brightness was excellent stood before me, and the form thereof was terrible. The image head was of fine gold, his breasts and his army of silver, and his arms, Salakia, and his arms of silver. His belly are dyed or of brass. His legs are iron, and his feet part of iron and part of clay. All right. So when you start with the gold, talking about the Assyrian, Babylonian rulership, and then it goes into the silver, all right, which was the Medo-Persians. All right. And when you go into the brass, that's talking about the Greeks. And then when it talks about the iron, that talks about, the Romans. All right. And then it goes into the iron and part clay. And that's where you get to, here, where we at now. All right, under the rulership, of Esau, Edom. This provides, Roman, the continuation of that Roman, rule. All right, it's the same thing. All right, and it says, thou sawest till a stone was cut out with thy hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and break them to pieces. Then was the iron, clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broke into pieces together, and become like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found. And the wind was carried them away, and that no place was found for them. And the stone was smote. The image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So, ultimately talking about, all right, when Yahweh returns, all right, he's gonna, destroy, this revised, Roman system. And ultimately, all these heathens, rulerships will be, taken down. All right, skipping down to 42. It says, and as the toes of the feet were part iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. So you have, some nations which are more economically stable, than others. All right. It says, and whereas thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, we're going into the NATO EU, got more nations that are more stable than others. All right. It says, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not cleaved with clay, right? Because they're not really joined, together. Really they're divided. All right, they're divided. Okay, and as I brought up the precept earlier, because I was, referencing this, a kingdom which is divided against itself is ultimately going to fall, because at some point, because they're so divided, they can never agree. It's going to lead to them, fighting. It's like you on a ship and everybody got beef with each other. It's like you're on a ship all right, on a boat, traveling to another country, and everybody just divided against, one another. ultimately is going to lead to fighting. All right, one is going to want to take over the other, but it's ultimately going to lead to just everybody fighting and then the ship never making it, to its destination. That's, basically the system. It's so much division that, all right, then Esau Edom was never going to be able to fulfill his new world order. And really because Yahweh Shai is not going to let it, happen. All right? Because scriptures tell us that if the days were not shortened, that the elect cannot, the elect, because the days were not shortened, no flesh should be saved. It's like you. I said the elect won't be saved, but, because the days are not shortened, that no flesh should be saved. And he's shortening the days for who? The elect's sake. All right? It says, and in the days of these kings shall the Most High, God of heaven, set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. And this is talking about the rulership of Yahushua, because we read how that stone came, all right, and broke into pieces together, basically broke the whole statue, down, and it fell. All right, so when Yahushua returns, he's going to take down, all these rulerships, all right, and our kingdom, his kingdom, I should say, which is ultimately going to be ours, because we're going to be joint heirs with him. All right, we'll rule, forever. There won't be an end, to it. All right. Continuing on, it says, well, that's about it. That's about it for this. But yeah, this is the last captivity for us. All right. This is Joel 3:1. It says, for behold, in those days, in that time, going into the future. So behold, look. It says, while we're bringing in the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, are we going to be restored as a nation? Us getting this just wisdom and knowledge, calling upon the names of Yahweh Shai is ultimately for the restoration. All right. It starts with this truth, but also we see prophecy, happening within the earth. While you see nations, warring against another, the beast hating the whore, the implementation of the mark of the beast. All right, that's why you see Israel and America, which are key figures in the scriptures. All right, America and Israel battling Iran. Why there's so much tension in the Middle East? It's leading up to a war. All right, for us to be saved, there has to be a war. There has to be a world, war. All right, it says, I will also gather all nations and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat and plead with them there for my people. Judge, meaning to judge, to plead, to judge. For his people, who is the people of the Lord, the so-called blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans. We are the chosen people of Yahweh Shai. It says, for my heritage, Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and part of my land. These nations, Amalek took our land. All right. It says, and they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boyfriend harlot and sold a girl for wine that they might drink. These things that they literally, have done. So there are things that these nations, mainly Esau Edom, have to pay for. All right, but it's, going to be done, not now, but in due time. We just have to wait, for it. All right, and you will ask, how's the Lord going to judge them in the valley of Jehoshaphat? Because in the midst of World War III, while they're fighting in the Middle East, Yahweh Shai is going to return. All right, he's going to return. All right, with a large, massive, chariot. Hence, that great mountain. All right, that mountain. And you go to 2 Ezra 13, starting at 1. All right, and this is gonna be the last precept. It says, and it came to pass after 7 days. Well, it might be the last precept. It's never know. It says, and it came to pass after 7 days, I dreamed a dream by night. This is Esdras, having a vision. It says, and lo, there arose there arose a wind from the sea that it moved all the waves thereof. This is when Yahweh Shah ultimately cracked them clouds, coming, from the heavens. And I beheld, and lo, that man waxed strong with the thousands of heaven. And when he turned his countenance to look, all the things trembled that were seen under him. So when Yahushua returns, he's going to return with an army. All right, the thousands of heaven. So he's coming with an army. You don't pull up. You don't come somewhere with thousands of people or even millions, of people. I ain't gonna put a limit. You don't pull up with a bunch of people just to, come. You don't. It's like you have a rulership, or using the ancient times, right? Somebody has a kingdom, and you pull up with everybody. Well, what is that? What is that? What is that? A show tell, for? Oh, he want to go to war. He want to fight. All right, this is, he pulling up to take. He's pulling up to take us down. All right, okay, because it even tells you in Jude 1 and where is that 14? And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, "Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints." So I get to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds, which they have ungodly committed, and of all their harsh speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. So, the Lord's coming with his saints, with the angels, okay, to, execute judgment. And we just read Joel, the 3rd chapter, to plead, the judge. All right, it says, and onceever the voice went out of his mouth, all they burned that heard his voice, like as the earth felleth, when it filleth the fire. All right, and then when that's talking about, talking about the concentrated fire, from the chariots. All right, and after this I beheld, and lo, there was gathered together a multitude of men out of number from the four winds of the heaven to subdue the man that came out of the sea. But I beheld, and lo, he had girded himself a great mountain and flew upon it. So again, going into World War III in the Middle East, these nations are going to be fighting, against one another. Hence the multitude of men. All right. But it talks about how Yahushua flew on a great mountain, right? Going into the fathership. But I would have seen the region or place where out the hill was graven, and I cannot. So the fathership that, the ship that Yahushua is going to return is going to be so massive. All right, even Ezra said it himself that he wanted to see the how large it was, right? How you look at something, you can see, the bottom to the top, or the the beginning of it or end. Like, so you look at a building, you can see, all right, it starts here and it ends there. All right, looking at the chariot, or you look at a car, you see, all right, it's, it starts here and it is it's here. It's about, this size. You can kind of, measure it with your hands, but with the fathership that Yahushua is going to return on, it's so massive that Edris was like, it was likened to a great mountain. That's how large it was. Imagine a fucking mountain, not an actual mountain, but imagine a mountain in the sky, Mount Everest, in the sky. That's how large it is. All right. Well, that's an example. It's larger than that. Okay, it says, and after this I beheld, and lo, all they which were gathered together to subdue him were so afraid, and yet there's fight. Even though they're gonna be scared, those will have to put a spirit on them to fight. Because who in their right man is gonna try to fight against, the Lord? All right. It says, and lo, as he saw the violence of the multitude that came, he neither lifted up his hand nor held sword nor any instrument of war. Right? Because Yahushua don't have to. He don't gotta do all that. Right? But only I saw that he sent out of his mouth as it had been a blast of fire, and out of his lips a flaming breath, and out of his tongue he cast out sparks and tempests, and they were all mixed together, the blast of fire, the flaming breath, and the great tempest, and fell with violence upon the multitude which was prepared to fight, and burned them up every one, so that upon a sudden of an innumerable multitude nothing was to be perceived, but only dust and smell of smoke. When I saw this, I was afraid. So again, that concentrated fire, hitting them soldiers, all right, it's going to turn them into dust, like you getting zapped with a laser beam. When you watch Independence Day, all right, it's likened unto that. All right, the chariot popped up, and started, attacking, people, all right, and also will turn them into dust, all right, because this is a war. Yahushua is coming to make war, with these nations. Revelation 19 and start at 10. It says, and I fell at his feet to worship him. And he said unto me, see thou do it not. I am thy fellow servant, and of thy brethren, that the testimony of Yahushai, worship Yahweh, for the testimony of Yahushai is the spirit of prophecy. So if you have this testimony, all right, of Yahushai, you will prophesy, all right? That's why when we see these Christian pastors and they're not warning the people, they're not prophesying, they're not telling other prophecies. Because what is a prophet supposed to do? He's supposed to say before. It's not only supposed to be, just, oh, just, you finna get that car and you finna, Lord dealing with you. Yeah, that's good. But you gotta warn them too. Be like, hey, you gotta repent. World War III is coming. Jacob's trouble is coming. Famine is coming. Death, judgment is coming. You gotta say that. The mark of the beast is coming. You gotta prophesy. You gotta be a prophet. It says, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. Talking about the chariot. He that sat upon him was called faithful and true, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. All right, Slakia. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. And that, right, going into again relating to 2 Ezra 13. All right, talking about Yahushai when he returns with the fathership. Okay, it says, and on his head were many crowns. All right, because Yahushai, when he returns, he's gonna take down, these nations, because he's the true, king. All right, he's a true king. He's gonna be on a rule. He's gonna be the one to rule over, ultimately all, nations. All right, and we're gonna rule over all nations, with him. So that he had a name written that no man knew but he himself, because Yahushua, all right, he's top rank. All right, nobody's above. All right, Yahushua. Okay, his rank. All right. It says he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood. His name is called the Word of the Most High. Who's the Word of God? All right. Scriptures talk about, the Word was made. The Word was made flesh. Okay. It says, and the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations. And he shall rule them with a rod of iron. He treaded the winepress of the fierceness and the wrath of the Almighty power. All right, going back into 2 Ezra 13. That goeth out of his mouth, that concentrated fire, smiting the nations, so he can rule. All right. All right. There's gonna be a lot of bloodshed as well. Hence he treaded the winepress. Okay, going into the bloodshed. A lot of people are about to die. All right, because not only will the Lord take down these nations' armies, but 2/3 of our people go die. The heathens that live in across the world, they go die. They go die as well. All right, but this is just focusing on the war. Okay, says he had on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords, because again, it's Yahushai. Nobody's above Yahushai. He's the King of Kings. He's the Lord of Lords. He is the heir, the only begotten of Yahweh. All right, everything was given unto him. All right, and he proved himself, as well by giving his life, for Israel, starting with the elect. All right, so that's why he gets the praise, and that's why he is, the king. All right, but one more precept. Isaiah 9:6. It says, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and a government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty Power, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Talking about Yahushua again, right? Because testimony of Yahushua is spirit of prophecy, so you got to prophesy. You got to talk about Yahushua, because Yahushua is part of that prophecy for him to return and to rule. All right, to set up his kingdom. It says, of the increase of his government and peace, there shall be no end upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of the Lord Yahweh of hosts will perform this. So, in due time, all right, we just have to be patient, for the rulership, the government of Yahushua to be, set up. And Lord willing, we part of the elect. We're going to be a part of that governing body, governing the earth, governing the universe, forever and ever. All right, where righteousness will spread forth, will flourish. Okay, and there won't be an end, to it, because we're going to be perfected. All right. Yeah, but with that, on this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushua, Ba'ashem, Makawadash, and double honors to our apostles and elders, great millstone, and Shalom to the Akim teaching, throughout the four corners and truth, sincerity, Shalom.